Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 12, Freemasonry and Education, from Book the First, The Theory of the Mystic Tie by Albert G. Mackey. Part 12, Freemasonry and Education. Do we hear of Freemasonry applying any portion of its funds in aid of supporting schools, or of advancing the interest of the arts and sciences? No, its funds are almost entirely appropriated to its own useless vanities. Freemasonry, an anti-Masonic poem. Notes, page 43. The adoption of efficient means for the education of the destitute orphan children of Masons constitutes one of the claims of our order to the esteem of the wise and good. Among the charities of Freemasonry, there is certainly none more important or more worthy of approbation than that which directs itself to the diffusion of learning. To feed the hungry and to clothe the naked are among the great objects of the Masonic institution. But there is a species of benevolence much higher than these, inasmuch as the mind is superior to the body, and which occupies itself in providing for the intellectual culture of the poor, which seeks to fulfill the proverbial direction of our great founder, and to bring up a child in the way he should go, and which by removing ignorance gives the assurance for the abolition of crime, its natural offspring. It will be impossible to furnish within any reasonable limits an account of all the efforts made by the lodges in various parts of the world to promote the cause of education. It will, however, perhaps be deemed sufficient if a few of these benevolent labors are here recorded. Ex pede Herculum. The reader may judge of the whole statute from a part. One of the earliest instances in England of the efforts of the craft to diffuse the blessings of education was the Royal Freemasons' Girls' School in the year 1788. To the Chevalier Ruffini is the honor due of having originated this truly charitable institution. In 1789, on the 1st of January, 15 children were taken into a house provided for them, but since that period, the number of pupils has increased to 66, with a new building which is now, I believe, completed at the expense of £1,200, which is capable of accommodating 100. The object of this charity is to educate the orphans of deceased or daughters of indigent Masons. It was observed in relation to this charity at one of the festivals by the Earl of Zetland as something worthy of notice that at the first establishment of this school, Ruffini, its founder, was in most prosperous circumstances, but that in after years, 2 of his grandchildren became recipients of the bounty of that noble institution which their progenitor had commenced. How true is the saying, cast thy bread upon the waters, and in many days it shall return unto thee. To this charity, not only the Grand Lodge of England, but the subordinate lodges throughout the kingdom and many individual brethren are in the custom of liberally contributing. The Royal Masonic Institution for Boys is another noble offspring of English Masonic benevolence. The object of this institution is to receive under its protection the sons of indigent Masons, to provide them with decent clothing, to afford them an education adapted to the situation in life which they are most probably destined to occupy, to inculcate such religious instruction as may be comfortable to the tenets of their parents, and ultimately to apprentice them to suitable trades. Children of all religious denominations and wherever reside are eligible to be admitted as candidates from the age of 7 to 10, provided their fathers have been Masons for 3 years, duly registered in the Grand Lodge books, and have continued subscribing members to a lodge for 2 years. In the year 1853, 748 boys had been clothed and educated by the charity. On the continent of Europe, attention was also early paid by the Freemasons to the important subject of education. In Germany, Denmark, and Sweden, says Laurie, charity schools were erected by the lodges for educating the children of Freemasons, whose poverty debarred them from this advantage. In that which was formed at Brunswick, they were instructed even in classical learning and various branches of the mathematics, and were regularly examined by the Duke of Brunswick, who rewarded the most deserving with suitable donations. At Eisenach, several seminaries of this kind were established. The teachers were endowed with fixed salaries, and in a short time after their institution, they had sent into the world 700 children instructed in the principles of science and the doctrines of Christianity. In 1771, an establishment of a similar kind was formed at Kassel, in which the children were maintained and educated till they could provide for themselves. In 1773, the United Lodges of Dresden, Leipzig, and Grosdick erected at Friedrichstadt a seminary of learning for children of every denomination in the Electorate of Saxony. The Masonic subscriptions were so numerous that the funds of the institution were sufficient for its maintenance, and in the space of 5 years, about 1,100 children received a liberal education. In the same year, an extensive workhouse was erected at Prague, in which the children were not only initiated into the first fruits of learning, but into those branches of the useful and fine arts, which might qualify them for commercial and agricultural situations. The members of the lodge held at Chemnitz in Germany, many years ago, amassed a fund by collections taken up at meetings held for the purpose of Masonic instruction. This fund has been constantly appropriated to the clothing and education of 15 poor children, some of whom are Protestants and some Catholics. There was at Dispolerwalde in Germany in 1845 no regularly constituted lodge, but as many of the inhabitants were Freemasons, these brethren formed a reading club, the subscription to which, after deducting necessary expenses, was directed to be appropriated to the purchase of Bibles, to be given as prizes to the most meritorious children of the schools in the town. The Institution for the Blind, established in Amsterdam by the Masons of Holland in 1808, is deserving of notice. Pupils are admitted to this establishment gratuitously if they are poor, or on the payment of a fee if they are able. Instructions are given in reading, grammar, arithmetic, and the other elementary sciences. Vocal and instrumental music and various mechanical arts appropriate to the blind are taught, such as basket and chair making, knitting, and occupations of a similar kind. Many of the lodges of Holland are in possession of extensive and valuable libraries, appropriated to the use of their members. It is but a few years since a benevolent brother of the name of Just, a member of a lodge in Dresden, bequeathed to the fraternity a capital of $24,000, about $17,000, for an asylum for the female orphans of Masons. The young girls are there instructed with a view to prepare them for the situation of teachers, while the physical and moral education which they receive enables them to discharge, with skill and fidelity, all the duties in future life that may devolve upon them as wives and mothers. In the United States, the subject of education has, for some years past, been receiving the earnest attention of the fraternity. Some of the results of that attention and the desire to disseminate the light of knowledge may be summed up in a few paragraphs. 15 years ago, the Grand Lodge of Virginia recommended this subject to the consideration of the fraternity in that state, and lately, a plan has been adopted by which the subordinate lodges draw lots for the support of a beneficiary selected by them for 2 years until each lodge has, in this way, been assisted by a grand charity fund. The Grand Lodge of Missouri has the honor of being the first Masonic body in the world that has established and endowed a college. In October 1841, the Grand Lodge adopted a resolution declaring it expedient and necessary and the imperative duty as well as the interest of the Grand Lodge to establish at some healthy and convenient point an institution of learning for the sons of indigenous Masons and such others as the Grand Lodge may from time to time admit. In 1842, a purchase was made of the property of a college, which had formerly been established at Marion in that state, consisting of the necessary buildings and 13 acres of land. The college has been since removed to the town of Lexington, and a president and professors having been appointed, the institution has been put into successful operation. The course of studies embraces the whole circle of literature and the sciences. The teachers are all required to be Master Masons, and everything like sectarianism in its government is strictly prohibited. Author's note: the college committee reported in 1855 that the institution is now permanently established. The doubts and fears of the timid and the hum of discontent of its opponents appear drowned by the notes of rejoicing, of confidence and fidelity, which salute the ear coming from every quarter. When the resolution to establish the college was introduced 12 years ago, the Grand Lodge was without a dollar which it could appropriate, and not one orphan boy was educated by Masonic charity in the state of Missouri. Now, more than 70 of them may come and drink of the pure fountain of science and virtue, free of tuition fees, some few of whom without any fee for maintenance or education. Proceeding of Grand Lodge of Missouri, 1855. There is also a Masonic college in Kentucky. William M. Funk, a citizen of that state, having bequeathed the sum of $10,000 to the town of LaGrange for the purpose of erecting a seminary of learning, on condition that the citizens of the town would subscribe the further sum of $5,000. The bequest was accepted, and a college edifice erected with accommodations for 300 students. In 1843, the trustees of the seminary made a tender of the fund and edifice to the Grand Lodge of Kentucky. The offer was accepted, and the transfer being made, the Grand Lodge immediately appropriated $10,000 as an endowment fund, and also adopted a resolution which required all good Masons to contribute $1 to be set apart for the support of the beneficiaries who might be sent to the school. The institution is conducted upon the same principles of literary and scientific instruction that govern other colleges in the United States, and is now in a very flourishing condition. In both this college and that of Missouri, the Orphans of Masons are gratuitously educated, each lodge being allowed a certain number of scholarships in proportion to the amount it has subscribed towards the endowment of the college. The Grand Lodge of Kentucky adopted in 1845 the following excellent resolution in relation to the subject of education. Resolved, that the Grand Lodge request each and every subordinate lodge under its jurisdiction to appoint a committee whose duty it shall be to find out all the orphan children of deceased Masons, within the limits of its jurisdiction, and those that are in indigent circumstances, and send said children to the schools in the neighborhood where they live, and pay for the same out of the funds of the lodge, and by subscriptions from members and intrinsic brethren. And if there cannot be means enough raised by such sources, then this Grand Lodge may appropriate such sums as it may deem proper for such purposes, by petition being made for the same. The Lodge and Chapter at Richland in Mississippi have established a prosperous seminary of learning under the name of Eureka Masonic College, to which the fostering aid of the Grand Lodge has been promised, as soon as it can be given without conflicting with other claims upon its bounty. This Grand Lodge appropriated in 1842 $2,050 towards defraying the expense of educating 4 blind children of Masons, and has ordered 25% of its aggregate gross funds shall be hereafter set apart for educational purposes. In October 1847, the Grand Lodge of Tennessee adopted resolutions for the purpose of collecting an education fund, and declaring that $1 for every degree conferred in the state, and a like sum to be contributed by every Mason who was not a member of a lodge, should be set apart for that object. It has also appropriated $1,200 to be invested in stocks as a school fund. The Grand Lodge of Indiana has resolved to levy a tax of $1 per annum for 4 years upon every Mason in the state, to be appropriated to the establishment of a permanent fund for the purpose of education. It has also directed its attentions to the formation of a manual labor school and a female orphan asylum. The Grand Lodge of North Carolina has appointed a standing committee with the view of making every necessary preliminary agreement for the ultimate establishment of a seminary of learning. Author's note: a site for St. John's College has been purchased since the publication of the first edition of this work, and funds are beginning to be accumulated for its endowment. The Grand Lodge of Ohio has appointed a committee of inquiry on this important subject, and shown a willing disposition to act, the committee having proposed a feasible plan for securing to every child of a Mason upon the Board of Domains of Ohio a good common school education. The Grand Lodge of Illinois, Florida, Iowa, and some other states have taken up the consideration of the question of education with a spirit that shows their desire, when circumstances will permit, to make this most important charity, the instruction of the poor, one of the essential ingredients of the Masonic system of relief. After reading this brief abstract of some of the efforts of the Masonic fraternity for the advancement of education, are we not prepared triumphantly to answer the question so sneeringly propounded by our adversaries, and which in an excusable spirit of irony I have adopted as the motto of the present article? Do we hear Freemasonry applying any portion of its funds in aid of supporting schools, or of advancing the interest of the arts and sciences? Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.